The scream came from the house next door, so faint most people would have ignored it. But Jackson Zeller wasn't most people. "Dad, wait." Little Leela called from the porch, clutching her stuffed fox as Jackson dropped his toolbox and jumped the fence like a man half his age. "Stay right there, baby," he shouted over his shoulder, landing hard in the overgrown backyard of the old Holloway place, the abandoned house no one had lived in for over a year. Another scream. Muffled, desperate. Jackson's boots crushed broken glass as he pulled open the rusted back door and stepped into a kitchen thick with dust and stale rot. He didn't wait. He moved by instinct, following the sound through the hall, past overturned furniture, then down a staircase he hadn't even known existed. His heart pounded. He could hear breathing now, strained. Panicked, he reached the bottom, flipped on his flashlight and froze. A woman. Chained to a pipe, her dark hair was matted, her lips cracked, her bare feet filthy against the concrete floor. Her eyes flinched against the light, but locked onto his with a raw kind of hope that nearly leveled him. "Oh my God," Jackson breathed, racing forward. Hey, I've got you, okay? You're safe now. I'm getting you out." "Please," she whispered, her voice barely there. "Don't leave me. I'm not going anywhere." The chain was thick, but the bolt cutter in his truck would tear it like paper. He bolted back upstairs, ignoring the way the floor threatened to give beneath him, and returned minutes later. She hadn't moved. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling beside her as he worked the chain. "Alessia," she said. "Alessia Hart." He clipped the chain, and she sagged forward into his arms. Her body was too light, but she clung to him like he was the last thing holding her to the world. "I've got you," he whispered again. He carried her up the stairs, out into the sunlight. Leela stood frozen on the other side of the fence, eyes wide. "Daddy," she asked. "Is she okay?" "She will be," Jackson said, laying Alessia down gently on his porch swing. He draped a blanket over her, then called 911. The paramedics came fast. Police followed. Jackson gave his statement, kept Leela close, and watched as Alessia, who never let go of his hand, was taken away. That night, after Leela was asleep, he stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the image of her eyes. She hadn't looked like a stranger. She'd looked like someone who'd been forgotten by the world, and for some reason, that cut deeper than anything ever had. A week passed before he saw her again. He was fixing a broken railing on the church steps when a sleek black sedan pulled up beside him. The driver stepped out and opened the door, and there she was, Alessia, clean, glowing, and dressed in a coat that probably cost more than his truck. Her eyes locked on him, warm and sure, and she stepped out of the car like she hadn't been held captive in a basement just days ago. "Jackson," she said softly. He stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You clean up okay?" She laughed, the sound light and beautiful. "You saved my life. You don't have to thank me. I'm not here to thank you. I'm here to see you," he blinked. You are," Alessia stepped closer, the wind catching her hair. "I've been in a hospital for days. Reporters, detectives, doctors, but all I've thought about is you." "You and your daughter," he stared at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because no one else found me, and because when you looked at me you didn't see a victim, you just saw a person, and I haven't had that in a long time." Jackson cleared his throat. "You said your name's Alessia Hart," she nodded. He tilted his head. "That name sounds familiar," she smiled. "It should. My family owns Hart Global." He froze. "Wait, Hart Global, as in the skyscraper downtown?" She nodded again, this time slower. "That's the one." Jackson stared at her, stunned. "You're a billionaire?" "I was," she said. "Until my uncle tried to kill me and steal control of the company, but that's a mess I'll deal with soon." Jackson let out a low whistle. "Wow, and here I thought I was just pulling a girl out of a basement." She reached for his hand. "You pulled me out of more than that." He looked down at their hands, hers soft and warm in his. "What do you want from me, Alessia?" She didn't blink. "Dinner," he blinked. "What, dinner?" she repeated. "You, me, and maybe Leela too if she likes pasta." Jackson laughed, shaking his head. "You're serious?" As a broken chain. He stared at her for a second longer, then smiled. "All right, but just so you know, my idea of fancy is a burger joint with real chairs." Alessia grinned. "Then I'll bring the ketchup." They had dinner that night at a small diner with flickering lights and the best fries in town. Leela sat across from Alessia, asking her every question under the sun. Alessia answered them all like she'd known the girl her whole life. When they walked Alessia back to her car, Leela hugged her tightly. "You can come to my birthday party," she whispered. Alessia looked up at Jackson. "I'd love that." As she drove away, Jackson stood with his daughter watching the taillights disappear. "Daddy," Leela asked. "Yeah, do you like her?" Jackson didn't answer right away, but his heart already knew. "Yeah," he said finally. "I really do." The next time Jackson saw her, she wasn't in designer clothes or stepping out of a black car. She was walking up his driveway in jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled into a loose braid, carrying a brown paper bag that smelled like roasted chicken. "I thought I'd return the favor," Alessia said, holding it out. "You fed me. Now I feed you." He took the bag, surprised by the weight of it. "This could feed a whole crew." "I wasn't sure what you liked," she said, glancing toward the house. "Is Leela around?" "She's at my sister's. I had a job site this morning. She doesn't like being around tools that make more noise than she does." Alessia laughed, and it was different this time, less careful, more real. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside. "Sure, but it's not much." Inside, his house was modest wood floors in need of refinishing, mismatched furniture, and a kitchen with more character than counter space. But it was clean and it was home. "You built this?" Alessia asked, running a finger along the edge of the kitchen table. "From the ground up. Took me 2 years." She nodded, studying the grain in the wood. "You can tell, everything feels solid." Jackson unpacked the food: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed vegetables, and a small container of what looked like lemon cake. "Where'd you get all this?" he asked. "I made it." "You cook?" She glanced at him. "You thought I'd forgotten how to live because I was born rich." He lifted his hands. "Didn't say that." She pulled out a chair and sat. "I learned from the housekeeper who raised me. My mother cared more about charity galas than dinners. Rosa taught me everything that actually mattered." Jackson sat across from her and picked up a fork. "Well, Rosa deserves a medal." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was incredible flavors, rich and balanced, like something out of a restaurant he couldn't afford to walk past. "I wanted to ask you something," Alessia said finally. He set his fork down. "Go ahead." "Why do you live like this?" He looked at her sharply. "Like what? In this house, driving that old truck, working from sunup to sundown. You're smart, Jackson. You could have done anything." He leaned back, folding his arms. "I had a plan once, construction engineering, scholarship and everything, but then my wife got sick and plans don't matter much when hospitals start asking for numbers you can't count." She looked down. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, well. Life doesn't owe us fair." She looked up again, eyes steady. "You didn't even ask who I was when you found me." "I didn't need to." "But why?" "Because you were bleeding and scared. That was enough. I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. But you didn't even hesitate. I've got a daughter. If she were ever in trouble, I'd want someone to help her without asking what she's worth first." Alessia reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "This is for you," he frowned. "What is it?" "Just open it." Inside was a check. He didn't finish reading the amount before pushing it back across the table. "I didn't save you for money." "I know that," she said, "but this isn't payment. It's an investment." "In what?" "In whatever dream you had before life got in the way." He stared at her. "That dream's buried, Alessia." "Then dig it up." "You saved my life, Jackson. Let me give a small part of it back." He didn't take the envelope. "You don't owe me anything." "I know. But maybe I want to." For a moment, neither of them moved. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old shutters against the siding. Inside, the air between them was charged with something he didn't want to name, something that had nothing to do with checks or favors. "I'm not good at this," he said finally. "At what?" "Letting people in." She met his gaze. "Neither am I." He stood and walked to the window. The sky was fading into dusk and the porch light flickered on with a soft hum. "You should stay for cake," he said, not looking at her. She rose slowly. "Only if you let me wash the dishes after. You drive a car that costs more than this house. And I still know how to use a sponge." They ate lemon cake on the porch, watching as the stars began to break through the sky. She didn't ask about his past again, and he didn't bring up hers. For once, it was just quiet and simple and good. When she finally stood to leave, he walked her to the gate. "You're not what I expected," he said. She smiled, brushing her fingers along the rusted metal. "Neither are you." He watched her disappear down the sidewalk, not knowing that the moment she turned the corner, she was on the phone. "Yes," she said into the receiver, her voice suddenly sharp. "I'm alive, and I'm coming back. But this time, I'm not coming alone." Jackson closed the gate and looked up at the sky. He didn't know what was coming. But something in his bones told him the woman he'd pulled out of that basement wasn't done turning his life upside down. Jackson had just finished repairing the gutter on the school's west wing when a black SUV rolled up beside the playground fence. His first thought was that it was someone lost, but when Alessia stepped out, dressed in a sharp navy pantsuit and holding a clipboard, the air shifted. She waved across the lot, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached with purpose. "You're dressed like you're about to fire someone," Jackson said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm here for a site assessment," she replied. "The school's board approved my foundation's proposal." "We're funding the full renovation," he stared at her. "You're what?" Her eyes sparkled with that same quiet certainty she'd had the day she handed him that envelope. "You said classrooms leak when it rains. Leela's been in this school since kindergarten. I figured it was time someone did something. You didn't have to do that. I know, but I wanted to." She tilted her head. "Unless you'd rather the kids keep dodging ceiling drips during math tests." He shook his head, still stunned. "You don't waste time, do you? I've had enough of it stolen to know better." She glanced toward the building. "Want to walk me through the structural issues? I brought my team, but I trust your eyes more." He hesitated. "You trust me, you saved my life. That earns you a lifetime supply of trust." They walked the perimeter, her team trailing behind at a polite distance. Jackson pointed out the cracked foundation near the gym entrance, the sagging roofline over the art room, and the outdated electrical wiring in the north wing. She listened intently, occasionally asking sharp, thoughtful questions that made it clear she wasn't just a name on a check. When they finished, she nodded toward the parking lot. "I'm heading to a board meeting downtown. Want a ride back to your place? I drove here." "Your truck's still here," she said, "but you're not going back to that house. Not yet." He squinted at her. "What do you mean, I need you?" "Excuse me." "For something important." He folded his arms. "What kind of important?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "My board thinks I'm weak, that I've lost control after the attempted takeover. They want to push me out completely. I have one chance to convince them otherwise. And that involves me how? They've only ever seen me as a number. A figurehead, but if I show up to this meeting with someone real, someone grounded, it changes the dynamic." "Let me guess," he said, narrowing his eyes. "You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? Fiancé, actually." He stared at her. "You're insane. They've already arranged a vote. If I don't prove I'm stable and in control of my life by the end of the month, they'll strip me of my decision-making power. And you think dragging along a contractor from a town they've never heard of is going to fix that?" She didn't flinch. "You're not just anyone. You're the man who found me when no one else even noticed I was missing. You're a father, a builder. You represent everything they can't buy." He laughed once, disbelieving. "And what happens if we pull it off? Do I just go back to fixing gutters while you head back to your glass tower?" Her voice dropped. "No. If we pull it off, I get to rebuild my company the right way, and I get to do it knowing I didn't have to become like them to survive." He didn't answer for a long time. Then, "And Leela, I'll have a suite set up for her at the hotel. A caregiver, someone you trust, can stay with her, or she can be with us during the day. Whatever you decide." He exhaled slowly, jaw tight. "This is crazy." "It is. And desperate. Also true." He looked at her a moment longer, then nodded once. "I'll do it." She blinked. "You will, but on one condition. Name it. No lies. If I'm going to stand beside you, I want to know what I'm walking into." "All of it." She studied him for a beat before replying. "Then you'd better pack a bag, because you're about to step into a world that's been trying to bury me since I was 17. Later that day, Jackson stood in the penthouse suite of the Delacroix Hotel, staring out at the skyline. Alessia had gone to prepare for the board meeting. Leela was in the living room, eyes wide as she explored a space bigger than their entire house. "Daddy," she whispered, holding up a gold-trimmed room service menu. "They bring you food to your room." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "Don't get used to it, kiddo." As he tucked her into bed in the second suite room that night, he paused at the door. "Alessia, he said, finding her in the sitting room, laptop open and papers spread across the table. What happens if this doesn't work? She closed the laptop slowly. If it doesn't work, I lose everything. My shares, my voting rights, my voice, he nodded. And you're willing to risk all that on me, she stood, walking over to him. I'm not risking it on you, I'm risking it with you. There was something in her voice that made his chest tighten. Not desperation, not strategy, something else, something that felt like the beginning of trust being returned. And if they ask how we met, he said, voice low, she smiled just slightly. We tell them the truth. And what's that? You saved me. And I never stopped falling since. Jackson didn't answer, but as she turned back to her notes, he knew something had shifted. He wasn't just a part of her plan, he was at the center of it. And no matter how temporary this arrangement was supposed to be, he had a sinking feeling it was about to change everything. The conference room at the top of Hart Global's headquarters gleamed with polished glass and chrome, reflecting the city's skyline like a silent witness. Jackson stood beside Alessia, wearing a tailored navy suit that Alessia's stylist had insisted on the night before. He hadn't worn anything with cufflinks in his life, but the moment she'd looked up at him and said, "You look like you belong," he'd stopped arguing. 5 men and 2 women lined the long table, each one wielding a smile sharpened with suspicion. At the head sat Landon Hart, Alessia's uncle. His jaw was tight, his gaze cool, and he hadn't said a word since they walked in. Alessia didn't flinch. She placed her hands neatly on the table, her engagement ring catching the light just enough to make a point. I'm here to reaffirm my position as majority shareholder and acting CEO, she said evenly. And to formally address the emergency vote called during my recovery. One of the directors, a wiry man with an expensive watch and an expression like he'd bitten into something sour, leaned forward. None of us were informed that you'd recovered enough to return. That's because I've been working off-site with legal and finance, Alessia replied, while also preparing a multi-million-dollar education initiative that just broke ground this morning. Another board member, a woman with sharp cheekbones and an air of impatience, interrupted. And the man beside you, Jackson met her gaze evenly. I'm Jackson Zeller, builder, father. Fiancé. A few eyebrows rose. Landon's voice cut in, cold and smooth. Interesting choice, Alessia. You go missing for nearly a month, and when you reappear, it's with a contractor from nowhere claiming you're engaged. Alessia didn't look at him. I wouldn't expect you to understand, Landon. You've never placed value on what's real, he smiled without warmth. You're right, I value stability, experience, not theatrics. Jackson didn't move, but his voice was steady. I didn't come here to play pretend. I came because Alessia asked me to stand with her. And I don't take that lightly. That ring on her finger, Landon said, tilting his head. Did you buy that on a construction worker's salary? Alessia stood. I bought it because I could. Just like I bought this company back from the brink 5 years ago when you lost half our international clients chasing empty ventures. The room quieted. Jackson watched her, something tightening in his chest. She wasn't performing. She was fighting, not for pride, not even for control, but for the right to live her life on her own terms. Landon's smile was still intact, but his eyes had darkened. You still haven't explained how this engagement restores confidence in your leadership. Alessia's voice softened, but didn't lose its edge. Because when I was at my lowest, starving, broken, left to die, it wasn't a bodyguard or a shareholder who found me. It was a man who had no reason to help me at all. He didn't know my name. He didn't care about my last name. He just came. She turned to Jackson. He's the only person in my life I've ever truly trusted, and if that's not stability, I don't know what is. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it passed. Alessia retained power. That night, Jackson stood on the rooftop terrace of her penthouse, the city glittering beneath them. Leela was asleep in the guest room, curled up with a new book Alessia had given her signed by the author, who apparently owed Alessia a favor. I didn't think they'd go for it, Jackson said, leaning on the railing. They almost didn't, she replied, sipping from a glass of iced tea. But they saw something they couldn't argue with. What's that? Me, unafraid. He turned to face her. So what now? She hesitated. Now I rebuild, clean house. Fire the ones who tried to bury me, invest in the projects I care about, and maybe Figure out what this thing between us actually is. He didn't answer right away, then he stepped closer. You want the truth? Always. I didn't think I'd make it through this, not just the suits and the lies, but you. You terrify me, Alessia. Why? Because you make me want things I thought I was done wanting. He looked away. Like second chances and hope, and she reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. Say it. He met her eyes, and love. She didn't blink. Then let me say it first. He shook his head. You don't have to. Oh, but I do, she whispered. Because when I was locked in that room, I thought I'd die knowing no one had ever really seen me. Not the girl in the magazines, not the woman behind the company. And then you walked in, covered in dust, determined to save someone you didn't know. And suddenly I didn't want to die anymore. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I don't care what happens next, as long as you don't walk away. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Except maybe. He raised an eyebrow. Maybe what? I might need to relocate the company headquarters, he blinked. To where? Her smile was soft. Somewhere with a wraparound porch and a crooked fence. Somewhere a little girl named Leela can ride a bike without bodyguards breathing down her neck. He laughed, pulling her in. You're serious? I've never been more. The kiss that followed wasn't flashy or cinematic. It was quiet, certain, like a promise finally made real. 3 months later, beneath a canopy of lights strung between oak trees in the backyard Jackson had built with his own hands, they exchanged vows written on the backs of napkins. Leela wore a flower crown and danced barefoot in the grass. There were no reporters, no shareholders, no press releases. Just them, and when Alessia leaned into Jackson during the first dance, she whispered, You didn't just rescue me, you gave me back my life. He smiled, holding her close. You gave me mine too, and neither of them ever let go again. Rain had started falling softly just before dusk, coating the windows of the quiet farmhouse with a misty silver sheen. Inside, the scent of roasted garlic and fresh thyme drifted from the kitchen, where Jackson stood at the stove, stirring a pot with one hand while balancing Leela's math workbook in the other. You know, Alessia said from the doorway, barefoot, her hair damp from the evening shower, I'm starting to suspect you've been a secret chef this whole time. Jackson glanced over his shoulder, grinning as Leela giggled from behind the counter. Don't tell anyone. I've got a reputation to keep. You mean the one where you pretend to be gruff and impossible, but secretly make the world's creamiest mashed potatoes. I'm denying everything. Alessia crossed the room and leaned against the counter, resting her chin in her hand. We should talk about the offer. Jackson set the spoon down and turned to her. Which one? The one from the mayor's office, about restoring the old train depot. They want to turn it into a community center. He nodded slowly. It's a good project. They want you to lead it. Entire design and build. He studied her face. You think I should take it? I think, she said, reaching for his hand, you finally stopped running from your own potential, and I think you'd make it into something incredible. He looked down at their joined hands. Would it mean more time away from home? Yes, but it would also mean more people getting to see what I see. She said it without fanfare, without trying to convince him. Just the truth laid bare. I'll do it, he said after a pause. On one condition. She raised an eyebrow. You stay on as project advisor. You've got the city wrapped around your finger and better instincts for people than anyone I've ever met. Alessia smiled. Deal. Leela stood at the edge of the room, holding a sheet of paper. I finished my story. Want to hear it? Jackson and Alessia both turned toward her, nodding. She cleared her throat and began to read. Once there was a girl who was really good at climbing trees and hiding secret candy in her pockets. She lived with her dad in a house with creaky stairs. One day, a lady fell out of the sky and landed in their world. She was fancy and strong and kind, and the girl liked her right away. The dad did too, but he didn't say it for a long time because grown-ups are weird, so the girl said it first, and the lady stayed. The end. Jackson blinked slowly. That's pretty accurate, Alessia crouched beside Leela. I like the part where I fall out of the sky, Leela pointed at her. You kind of did. Jackson gathered them both into a hug, pulling them close. We should frame that story. Alessia pressed a kiss to his cheek. We already lived it. The next morning, they drove to the city together. The press conference announcing the restoration project was held on the cracked platform of the abandoned train station. Alessia spoke first, her voice steady, her words full of purpose and clarity. When she introduced Jackson as the project lead, the crowd applauded, and he took the mic for the first time not as the man beside the woman in charge, but as her equal. "This place has been forgotten," he said, glancing back at the faded brick and twisted iron. But forgotten things aren't lost forever. Sometimes, they just need someone to believe in them again. When it was over, they walked hand in hand down the old tracks, Leela chasing a butterfly ahead of them. "I kept thinking life had already given me everything it was going to," Jackson said quietly. "I used to think that too," Alessia replied, "until I realized maybe I'd never asked it for the right things." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I never asked you properly." She tilted her head. "Asked me what?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "To marry me, not for the board, not for the company, but for real." Alessia stared at him, her eyes wide. "I know we already had a wedding," he went on, "but now I want the kind that's just ours. No cameras, no boardrooms, just us, forever." She opened the box slowly. Inside was a ring unlike the first. It wasn't enormous or flashy, it was delicate, handcrafted, with a small, intricate pattern of branches wrapping around a single diamond. "Jackson," she whispered, voice thick. He took her hand. "Will you marry me for real this time?" She didn't speak. She just nodded, eyes brimming, and kissed him like the answer had always been yes. They married a month later beneath a canopy of maple trees behind the old church Leela now attended. No photographers, no press, just friends' laughter and the kind of vows that didn't need microphones to be heard. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the stars blinked awake, Jackson held Alessia on the porch swing they'd refinished together. "You know," he said, brushing her hair back, "you never told me what falling in love with me felt like." She laughed softly. "Like exhaling after holding my breath for years." He kissed the top of her head. "That's exactly what loving you feels like too." Inside, Leela's laughter echoed through the house as she played with her cousins. The fire crackled. The world turned. And for the first time in either of their lives, it turned just right.